All right, here's lesson 2 of Unit 10, Cold War, America, 1950s, Politics, Society, Second Red Scare, late 1940s, moving into the 50s, Second Red Scare, domestic policies, issues, conflicts. Explain those things. Facing the post-war economy, what are our issues, domestic response to the threat of communism, and domestic politics should be added there as well. I'll have it fixed by the end of the slideshow here. The post-war economy, just like with World War I, we have a rise in prices because of the demand for goods going up, and the war always pushes the demand for goods up. This is going to be the case even after the war is done. The government removes price controls that kept things in control during the war, so there wasn't stress on people at home. When they're removed, prices start to go up. That puts stress on people and their wages, and workers seek better conditions. They start to go on strike. Truman forces them back to work and uses pretty blunt force as before the war, in the interwar period, with the government saying you can't go on strike, it's not allowable. And it's back to that situation where unions and labor are associated with the bad people, communists, radicals, again. So one of the things that's helping out with this is the fact that the United States is going to play a major role in rebuilding the world, so we never really will stop producing things. We're just going to shift what we're producing things for, not war, but now for rebuilding the war and also growing the country, with several different factors helping us grow. One of the things that helps in this post-war economy is something called the GI Bill of Rights. It's also officially known as the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944. GI stands for government issue. Soldiers in the military, everything they had and their existence was based on things that were issued to them by the United States government, Uncle Sam. But what this is going to do, it's going to give money in terms of loans for returning soldiers from the war. It's going to give them cheap, low-interest loans for homes, and especially for going into finding occupations, getting education, training, technical skills, technical training, vocational training, to have a job within a year or two of coming back to the United States. So this kind of takes on some of the pressure of demands for jobs over the course of years, spreads it out, and also creates the most skilled workforce in world history of any nation. And it provides for and helps create a great amount of economic growth in the decades to come. Reduces unemployment at the time, of course, again, boosts the economy. So this is a big deal. There is a political struggle going on, of course, Truman fighting the Republicans and what Truman represents, the Democratic Party, basically a New Deal and a New Deal administration yet, but his plan is called the Fair Deal. And what's going to happen here is, as with the New Deal from the Great Depression, there is this thing called minimum wages out there yet. He's going to ask for an increase in the minimum wage. This would help with the economy, expand Social Security benefits to those who need it. This would help put more money in people's pockets, of course, raise taxes to do so out of people's paychecks, and public housing, affordable public housing. National Health Service as well, not a new idea today. Obamacare, been around for a while, introduced in this plan, and civil rights legislation is going to be a part of this as well. And you can see this cartoon has a little bit of a play on that whole fair deal thing. It's just a facade, it's superficial, and what's behind it. It's a lot more spending, and it's just something that's being propped up by spending. It's going too far, expansion of the budget, debt, and the same old type of policy with the budget and the economy that we had under FDR, and it's not okay. And so, will it ever stop? If we give these programs out and we expand them, the people aren't going to stop coming for their share of the program, as exemplified by these little piglets, little grafters. Remember the political machines and graft. And it's just going to go around and around, and develops, and the criticism is it creates corruption and inflation and bureaucracy and federal government jobs and administrations, and an expectation to get things that are from the government and in some cases maybe not work for as much as they should be. In terms of the Fair Deal Civil Rights Program, in 1946, Truman commissions a committee on civil rights, and he says, go out there and tell me what's going on in the world. Give me a report about recommendations for civil rights and civil liberties. And they come back with a report, and it's called To Secure These Rights, and it called for basically desegregation of society, anti-lynching laws. If you remember that gal by the name of Ida B. Wells calling for that and trying to get that to happen under FDR's program administration. Didn't really happen. Been around before, but very progressive thing. Not much movement there for progressives and minorities, African Americans. And then to poll taxes, literacy tests, that kind of thing. And it basically had 4 key tenets in all this. 1, the right to safety and security needs to be guaranteed. The right to citizenship and its privileges needs to be cleaned up and guaranteed. Action on that, the right to equality of opportunity, and the right to freedom of conscious expression. These things aren't necessarily there for all Americans, and the Commission says we need to do this type of stuff to try and make sure that that happens and becomes a reality. So Truman pushes for this, and there becomes a bit of a problem. Here's some statistics showing, again, lynchings that are going on in the country during this time period, 1882 to 1846, number of victims, so on and so forth, by time period from 1946 to 1882. By state, of course, it's most severe in the South, but it is happening in other places in the country. It was becoming so well aware to people that this is now coming to light and being pushed at the federal government level from the administration, the Democratic administration, that hadn't been able to do anything like this before. So they recommended these kinds of things, and there's some pushback. Pushback is going to come from a region that is pretty obvious, probably the South. But as this is going on, there are some individual people in America that are pretty significant here that are starting to break down the barriers, and that is Jackie Robinson, 1947, big American baseball hero at the time, drafted by the Brooklyn Dodgers and being the first African American in the white Major League Baseball world. So he starts pushing this civil rights legislation that everybody receive equal rights, there should be no discrimination, legislation trying to make sure all those recommendations from that report happen, especially protecting black voting rights. And when Truman decided he was going to do something, he was going to do something. He made a decision. He always stood by it, for the most part, as I ever understand. Pretty bull-headed, mule-headed farmer from Missouri. And his legislation is, again, very much resisted from, you guessed it here again, the South. Remember the post-Reconstruction time period here where the South is that solid blue Democratic South? If you're a Democratic president and you start talking civil rights, a section of your country or a section of your party from a section of the country is going to push back. They were not interested in this at all. Therefore, other fair deal things may not happen or may be more difficult. The civil rights aspect of things don't happen right away in his administration, but there are going to be some things that happen under Eisenhower's administration. But one of the things that Truman does do is that he does desegregate the military with Executive Order 9981. This ends the racial separation in the United States Armed Forces. And the Korean War, as a matter of fact, will be the first war in which that integration occurs in U.S. history, other than the Revolution back in the day. Everybody fought together. After that, not until the Korean War. Political struggles in the Democratic Party exist then because of this sectional division in the Democratic Party. Just like with the Civil War, Northern Democrats and Southern Democrats start to see things quite different. We're going to see this causing a split and a shift in the political party here and political party loyalty later on. But the Dixiecrats became kind of a second arm of the Democratic Party, and they opposed Truman's civil rights programs. And it was all about states' rights again. Sound familiar from that pre-Civil War time period? States' rights. It's all right to determine how things should be, and Strom Thurmond was their key candidate. So the Dixiecrats really are Southern Democrats who don't have this mindset of civil liberties here. And there were significant protests about this and turmoil about this kind of thing. And when it comes to his election of 1948, he's just finished FDR's term that he won. It's really looking very much in doubt that he's going to win at all. He was considered to be a huge underdog, and this guy by the name of Dewey was, criticizing the New Deal and everything that the Democrats stood for, and it was almost a shoo-in that he was going to win, it seemed. But Truman pulls it out. And funny enough, Chicago newspaper actually reports that he had lost to Dewey, but they reported that a little bit too soon, and Truman got the last laugh. Kind of a big mistake there, and mud in their eye with that one. So he got the last laugh in that. And so Truman wins on his own personality and his own platform, and it's a pretty big deal for him, and it is really also for the United States, as we'll see here that Truman is considered by 2009 CNN poll of most important presidents and successful presidents, impactful presidents, to be one of the tops here in all of that. And he had the nickname of Giving Hell Harry, and he always said, the buck stops here, what I say goes, and this is our decision, and this is what I'll stand by, and I'll take responsibility for it too. That was always his kind of mindset. And again, here he is in terms of the ratings back in 2009. He's number 5. I think there's a new one that's out, and I think Obama is somewhere here at around 12, 13, or 14. Election 1948, we have Democrats still controlling both houses, have done so since 1932, so they're able to pass legislation increasing Social Security, some housing, public housing, expanded public housing for low-wage people, an expanded minimum wage, that kind of deal. But the civil rights thing doesn't happen, so that's on the back burner for a few more years. But we have this major second Red Scare going on. There's this fear of communist subversion and sabotage that's going on. There is knowledge of the Soviet atomic bomb, again, that we talked about before, has been exploded in 1949. China turned communist in 1949, and there's this concern that there are communists all over the place. In fact, there's concern of communists that's been around since 1919, 1920. And keep your eye out and aware of who these radicals are and where are they. In fact, there is a committee on un-American activities that gets formed in the United States House of Representatives, and they've been holding hearings since before World War I. 1938 it was formed. And so there's a significant amount of paranoia here. And one of the key pieces of paranoia here that develops is something called the McCarthyism Act of 1952. Working a little bit backwards in time here with all this, but basically it was an act passed by Congress that said all communists had to register with the United States government, their address, who they are, and all that kind of thing, so they could be essentially watched. Truman vetoed it, saying it gives the president way too much power. He could actually, I believe, kick people out if they identified themselves as communist, but it was overridden by Congress in this scenario, in this situation. And this was in response to a couple trials that are going to come up about people who were alleged spies in the United States government and working for the United States government. One, the Alger Hiss trial in 1950, and then also the Rosenberg trial in 1951. We'll come back to that in a little bit. And of course, again, communism is spreading from country to country in Europe and in Asia, and things are looking scary to Americans at that time. And are they here? And there were Communist Party members here. And so they go looking for them. Truman makes an effort to be aware of who they are by establishing a program called the Federal Employee Loyalty Program. You should put 1947 by that. And essentially the FBI goes out and starts looking for and trying to find out who is a member of the Communist Party, who has socialist leanings, that kind of thing. Essentially, interviewing and taking account for 6 million different people overall in the government and in the government's employment as to whether or not they're involved with the Communist Party. This is where we have J. Edgar Hoover again leading the charge against communists and radicals. 3,000 or so lost their jobs or resigned their positions because of this pressure that was going on. And they were questioned about their loyalty. Who are you associated with? Do you know this person? This person is a socialist, that kind of thing. And they're forced to take loyalty oaths. Even some school districts in the country at this time forced teachers to take loyalty oaths. And it was considered to be certain people of certain professions and backgrounds that had more liberal ideas and leanings, and so they were targeted first. And we'll take a look at a couple of those coming up a little bit later on. But the House of Un-American Activities Committee, again, formed in 1938, was pretty active, strongly active in this. Where is the communist subversion? Where is it? And if you knew somebody that was a member of the Communist Party or a socialist group, you were perhaps guilty by association. And so there's a pretty strong backlash with all of this because of course, First Amendment rights, Bill of Rights issues, things of that had been around before since the beginning of our first years in the new Constitution. Federalist era, Sedition Acts, Adams administration, French Revolution being one of them, and of course World War I Sedition Acts. 1947, particular groups of people from particular backgrounds, segments of society, i.e. those in Hollywood, actors, producers, directors, were maybe a little bit more on the liberal side and were especially focused on as to whether or not they were supporters of the Communist Party, what they were doing, who they were meeting with, and if you were associated with any of these people who were identified with them, then you were probably going to be blacklisted. And there is a group by the name of the Hollywood 10 who were essentially blacklisted in the industry and never received a job, as far as I understand it anyway, in Hollywood, again, because of their being labeled communist or socialist, suspicious in their loyalty. A particular person that was a little bit in risk of this as well is the wife of Ronald Reagan. At the time, her name was Nancy Davis. She was a popular Hollywood actress. She just passed away this last year. And in fact, one of the important people at the time, and the actor at the time, not into politics yet, was Ronald Reagan, and he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild. And she kind of went to him for some help and protection, and it turned into something else. So that's Nancy Davis Reagan there, that kind of had that experience as well with this Red Scare. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, again, working a little bit backwards in time here, were in 1951 convicted of espionage for giving atomic bomb information for the Soviet Union. They were put on trial. If you look at, did a little bit of Google searching here now on some of the recent research and evidence about how the trial was conducted and evidence posed against them in the process of things, it's kind of coming to a conclusion here that perhaps this trial was very much similar to the Sacco and Vanzetti trial. Driven by paranoia, extreme fear, maybe not a fair trial, probably not a fair trial, executed in 1953. First husband and wife to ever have been executed in U.S. history. And in 1948, under the House of Un-American Activities, hearings and commissions, we have a guy by the name of Alger Hiss as well, who was an employee of the State Department. That State Department deals with foreign relations in foreign countries, and a newspaper editor who was formerly of some socialist communist background, said he was a communist, and he was convicted and accused and convicted of perjury and lying to Congress about that, and was given 5 years in prison. A guy that was super essential in all of this, in this process, in this HUAC investigation in particular, and others, is a guy by the name of Richard Nixon. He became a household name for being a communist hunter and finding out who are these people. You might be familiar with this, the Crucible, Arthur Miller's Crucible, popular play at the time, 1950s. It really used this 1950s witch hunt as being similar to the Salem witch trials in the 1690s in Massachusetts, a metaphor for McCarthyism. And that leads us to this McCarthy guy. Senator Joseph McCarthy, hugely influential and probably the most common name in this push and hunt for radicals, is basically alleging that the communists are in every part of our government. He was making these declarations without any particular proof. He was establishing these committee hearings and calling people in front of the United States Senate to ask questions about what they're involved with, who do you know, are you a member of this organization, prove that you are not a member of the Communist Party, and it ruined a lot of people's lives. And he actually did come up with evidence that was faked and doctored and made up, every bit of it made up, to get people whipped up into this Red Scare. It became known as McCarthyism, and it's still used today as a euphemism for anything that's radical and witch hunty and crazy like that. In the end, he starts actually even accusing the top generals of the United States military of being communist, and when that happens, then it kind of all backfires on him, and the United States Senate censures him, and he kind of fades away and goes away. So it creates a huge amount of hysteria for the people in the country at the time. And of course, we've got mass media, electronic media, radio, television, not quite strongly happening here yet in the 1950s. There's still mostly people's media by visuals and through theaters and clips like that, prior to major films and such, but it had a majorly fearful impact on the populist and domestic mindset of people at the time. So, reviewing your essential questions, issues involving the economy in the post-war time period. There is inflation because there is some price controls that go away. There was some stress on workers. There were some strikes. The government and Truman really reinforced that those things can't happen, and really put them down pretty vigorously with some legislation you're going to read about, and to try and keep the economy going. They proposed the fair deal with expanded some New Deal programs, as well as passing a very historic program called the GI Bill that helps reduce the pressure and give people economic opportunity, training, education for the future. That makes a big difference. But also remember in this, wasn't talked about here, but remember that Marshall Plan. That's a big deal here in all of this as well. Big deal domestic politics, the fair deal in terms of civil rights, desegregation, the Executive Order 9981, and I forgot to put it down there, but the Dixiecrats and Southern resistance here is a big deal. There's conflict over this, and that long-standing continuity of let states do as they please in terms of civil rights down here. It's not the federal government's role, is strong here in the 1940s and leading into the 1950s. Visually, what else is going on with the affluent society that we have here, our booming economy? There's a baby boom. Everyone born from 1945 to 1963, all kinds of young GIs coming back, having children. Huge spike in the population. Babies require a lot. That means money's flowing. Marshall Plan, as we talked about before, the GI Bill, and then there's a massive technological explosion that goes on here in the 1950s. There's a consumer economy that's even bigger than that of the 1920s, and all kinds of new industries and such, TV being one of them, airline industries. The economy's going in the 1950s, and we're going to do pretty darn well all the way through till about the year 1970, when all of a sudden things start going a different direction. But these are some of the key factors behind this roaring economic revolution we have in the 1950s. Be prepared for any quizzes that might come your way. Home running, make hay, the sun's shining, you got time to get things done. Why not do it now as opposed to put it off till later? Good day.